Some cars had the power, the style, and the innovation, but never got the credit they deserved. Whether they were ahead of their time, overshadowed by bigger names, or just forgotten by history, these 12 hidden gems deserve a second look. Get ready to rediscover the most underrated cars ever built. The 1991 GMC Cyclone is one of those rare automotive anomalies that shouldn't have existed, but somehow did. A pickup truck with the performance of a high-end sports car, it was a vehicle that defied logic, expectations, and even the laws of physics as people understood them at the time. Here was a compact GMC pickup that could outrun Ferraris, Porsches, and Corvettes in a straight line, all while looking like a work truck with a turbocharged secret under the hood. It was ahead of its time, misunderstood, and ultimately short-lived, but it remains one of the most legendary sleepers ever built. The Cyclone was born out of a bold idea. What if GMC took their standard Sonoma pickup and turned it into a high-performance street machine? The late 80s and early 90s were an experimental time for performance vehicles, with automakers testing the limits of turbocharging, electronic fuel injection, and all-wheel drive technology. The Cyclone was an extreme take on all of these, blending raw muscle with advanced engineering to create something that had never been seen before. A muscle truck with the acceleration of an exotic sports car. At the heart of the Cyclone was a heavily modified 4.3-liter V6, boosted by a Mitsubishi TDR6 TNC turbocharger and an air-to-water intercooler sourced from Garrett. This setup pushed the small V6 to an underrated 280 horsepower and a staggering 350 foot of torque. However, many owners and testers found that the real output was closer to 300 horsepower, making it one of the most powerful factory pickups of its time. But raw power wasn't the only trick up the Cyclone's sleeve. What made it truly special was its drivetrain. Unlike typical performance cars that relied on rear-wheel drive for maximum straight-line acceleration, the Cyclone came with a full-time all-wheel drive system developed by BorgWarner. This AWD setup sent 35% of the power to the front wheels and 65% to the rear, ensuring that all that turbocharged torque was put to the ground efficiently. The result? A 0-60 mph per time of just 4.3 seconds, faster than a Ferrari 348 and quicker than nearly any American car of the early 90s. Even more impressively, the Cyclone could cover the quarter mile in 13.4 seconds at 98 mph, putting it in the same league as high-performance muscle cars of the era. But the Cyclone wasn't just about raw speed. It handled well for a pickup truck, too. GMC engineers upgraded the suspension with a lowered ride height, sportier shocks, and a reinforced chassis. The truck also featured a limited-slip rear differential and four-wheel anti-lock brakes, advanced features for a pickup in the early 90s. Despite being designed for straight eight-line speed, the Cyclone was surprisingly capable in the corners, offering a balanced driving experience that was unheard of in a truck. Visually, the Cyclone was pure menace. Finished exclusively in black with body-colored cladding, it had a sinister, stealthy look that screamed performance. The aggressive stance, flared wheel arches, and 16-inch aluminum wheels gave it a sporty yet understated appearance. Unlike the flashy sports cars it could outrun, the Cyclone didn't advertise its speed. It looked like a tough little work truck, and that made it one of the greatest sleepers of all time. Despite its incredible performance, the Cyclone was a commercial failure. GMC had originally planned to build thousands, but in the end, only 2,995 units were produced for the 1991 model year. A handful of 992 models were made, but production was ultimately canceled. Why? The market simply wasn't ready for a high-performance pickup truck. Buyers looking for a fast vehicle typically went for muscle cars or sports cars, while truck buyers wanted towing capacity and utility, two things the Cyclone didn't prioritize. The truck's bed was practically useless due to the all-wheel drive system taking up most of the undercarriage space, and it had a limited towing capacity of just 500 pounds, making it more of a sports coupe in disguise than a practical truck. Yet, despite its short-lived production run, the Cyclone developed a cult following. It remains one of the most unique and surprising performance vehicles ever built. A truck that could line up against a Ferrari at a stoplight and leave it in the dust. Today, finding a clean Cyclone is a challenge, as many were driven hard or modified over the years. Pristine examples are highly sought after by collectors, and their rarity only adds to their mystique. In hindsight, the Cyclone was way ahead of its time. Today, high-performance trucks like the Ford F-150 Raptor and Ram TRX are celebrated for their speed and capability. But in 1991, the idea of a performance pickup was too radical for the market to embrace. It was a misunderstood masterpiece, a vehicle that defied expectations, and one of the greatest performance trucks ever created. The 1969 AMC AMX 390 is one of the most overlooked muscle cars of its era, an underdog that punched far above its weight but never quite got the recognition it deserved. Built by American Motors Corporation, a company often overshadowed by the big three, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, the AMX was AMC's attempt to prove they could build a world-class performance machine. And they succeeded. With a powerful 390 cubic inch V8, a lightweight two-seater body, and serious straight-line performance, the AMX could outrun many Mustangs, and Camaros, and even some Corvettes. But despite its capabilities, it remained a hidden gem rather than a household name. At a time when muscle cars were getting bigger and heavier, AMC took a different approach. Instead of making a massive coupe with a long wheelbase, they designed the AMX as a short wheelbase two-seater, a rarity among American muscle cars. It was essentially a chopped-down Javelin, but the shorter length and reduced weight made it an absolute rocket on the streets. The most potent version packed a 390 cubic inch V8, producing 315 horsepower and 425 Nm of torque. While these numbers might not sound extreme today, back in 1969, this was serious muscle. The AMX could blast from 0 to 60 mph in just 6.6 seconds and run the quarter mile in the high 14s, making it one of the quickest American cars of its time. The AMX wasn't just about raw power, it had handling too. Thanks to its compact dimensions and a nearly perfect front-to-rear weight distribution, it had an agility that many muscle cars lacked. The short wheelbase gave it a nimbleness that Mustangs and Camaros couldn't quite match, making it a joy to drive on twisty roads as well as in straight-line sprints. AMC even offered the Go package, which included upgraded suspension, power front disc brakes, and a limited slip differential, making the AMX a well-rounded performance machine. From a styling perspective, the AMX had a distinctive, aggressive look. With its long hood, short deck, and fastback rear, it had a sleek yet muscular profile that stood out from the typical pony cars of the era. The dual hood scoops and optional racing stripes gave it a competition-ready vibe, and AMC made sure it had enough visual presence to turn heads at the stoplight. But the real beauty of the AMX was its rarity. While Mustangs and Camaros were everywhere, spotting an AMX was a special occasion. Despite all of its strengths, the AMX never achieved mainstream success. Part of the reason was AMC's reputation. The company was known for practical economy cars rather than high-performance machines, and many buyers simply didn't take them seriously as a muscle car contender. Additionally, the AMX's two-seater design made it less practical than other muscle cars with rear seats, which limited its appeal to a broader audience. Most muscle car buyers wanted something they could take to the drag strip on Sunday but still use as a daily driver during the week. And the AMX's lack of rear seating made that a tougher sell. Another factor that worked against the AMX was its competition. In 1969, the market was flooded with muscle cars, from the Boss 302 Mustang to the Plymouth Roadrunner, and buyers gravitated toward the more established names. AMC, despite its best efforts, simply didn't have the dealership network, marketing power, or brand prestige to compete on the same level. Even though the AMX was a capable performer, it remained in the shadows while the bigger names got all the attention. Still, for those who knew what it was capable of, the AMX was a sleeper hit. It was affordable, fast, and fun, and it proved that AMC could build a serious performance car. Over time, it has gained a cult following among enthusiasts who appreciate its rarity and underdog status. Today, well-preserved AMXs are highly sought after, with the 390 powered versions commanding strong prices at auctions. It may not have been a mainstream success in its day, but the AMX has earned its place as one of the most underrated muscle cars of the golden era. In many ways, the AMX was ahead of its time. It was a lightweight, performance-focused muscle car when most of the competition was getting bigger and heavier. It had a unique personality, offering a combination of speed, agility, and exclusivity that made it special. And while it never became as famous as the Mustangs and Camaros of the world, those who have driven one know the truth. The 1969 AMC AMX 390 was a true muscle car legend, hiding in plain sight. The 1987 Buick GNX was one of the greatest sleepers of all time, a car that looked like something your grandfather might have driven but packed enough turbocharged fury to embarrass the best performance cars of the era. The GNX wasn't just another muscle car, it was a technological marvel, a last hurrah for Buick's brief but glorious dominance in the world of turbocharged performance. Built as the ultimate evolution of the already potent Grand National, the GNX took everything that made its predecessor special and turned it up to 11. While Buick officially rated it at 276 horsepower, insiders knew that was a joke. Real-world figures put it closer to 300 or even 320 horsepower, making it quicker than just about anything short of an exotic supercar. At the heart of the GNX was its 3.8-liter turbocharged and intercooled V6, an engine that had been refined and improved over years of development in the Grand National. For the GNX, Buick teamed up with ASC McLaren to push it even further, fitting a larger Garrett T3 turbocharger, a more efficient intercooler, and a recalibrated engine management system. The result was a torque monster, over 360 albeit at just 3,000 RPM, allowing it to launch like a missile from a stop. Buick claimed a 0-60 time of 4.6 seconds, but contemporary tests clocked it even faster. That was enough to leave a Ferrari Testarossa or a Porsche 911 Turbo in its dust. The quarter mile? 13.2 seconds at 104 mph, faster than a Corvette, faster than a Mustang GT, and faster than most people expected from a car that looked so unassuming. And that was part of the magic of the GNX. It didn't look like a sports car. There were no flashy graphics, no aggressive wings, no bright colors. Instead, it came in sinister, all-black paint, with subtle yet meaningful tweaks over the standard Grand National. Fender flares were widened slightly to accommodate the unique lightweight aluminum wheels, and functional vents helped extract heat from the engine bay. Other than that, it was still the same squared-off, boxy G-body Regal that looked more suited for a Sunday drive to church than a drag strip. But that's what made it such a legend. It was the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing. Buick didn't just focus on power, though. The GNX received a reworked suspension with stiffer shocks and improved rear suspension geometry to handle all that turbocharged torque. The rear axle was upgraded with a torque arm and panhard bar setup to improve stability under acceleration, and a reinforced 204R automatic transmission was fitted to handle the immense power. Unlike most muscle cars of the era, which still relied on big V8s and old-school tuning tricks, the GNX felt futuristic, like a glimpse of what performance cars would become in the turbocharged 1990s and beyond. Unfortunately, the GNX was never meant to be a mass-market car. Buick limited production to just 547 units, each one individually numbered with a dash plaque as if to remind owners that they had something truly special. The reason? The GNX was the swan song for the turbo Buick era. By 1988, General Motors was shifting Buick's focus toward luxury, and performance was no longer part of the equation. In a way, that only added to the GNX's mystique. It was the last of its kind, a final, defiant statement that Buick could build a world-class performance car when it wanted to. Despite its brief production run, the GNX became an instant legend. Car magazines raved about its absurd performance, and street racers quickly realized that it could outrun just about anything with four wheels. But like so many great sleepers, it was also misunderstood. People who didn't follow the car world saw it as just another Buick, not realizing that it was one of the quickest cars on the road. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, and it didn't announce itself until you put your foot down and left everything else in the rearview mirror. Over the years, the GNX has only grown in legend. Today, it's one of the most sought-after American performance cars of the 1980s, with low-mileage examples commanding six-figure prices at auctions. It represents the perfect blend of muscle car heritage and modern turbocharged engineering. A car that was ahead of its time in both performance and design. It also serves as a reminder of what Buick once was. Before the days of SUVs and sedans, it was a brand capable of building a car that could outdrag a Ferrari. The GNX wasn't just a car, it was a statement that turbocharging was the future, that American cars could be both fast and high-tech, and that sometimes the most unassuming cars are the most dangerous. Even today, in a world filled with 700 horsepower Hellcats and electric hypercars, the 1987 Buick GNX still holds a special place in history. Because there's nothing quite like the feeling of seeing someone underestimate it right before it disappears down the road. The 1970 Mercury Cyclone Spoiler Boss 429 was one of the most fearsome yet overlooked muscle cars of its time, a machine that should have been a legend, but instead became one of the rarest and least remembered of the NASCAR-inspired street cars. While everyone remembers the Boss 429 Mustang, few realize that Mercury also got its hands on the same race-bred 429 cubic inch monster and stuffed it into the Cyclone spoiler. A car that was every bit as wild as its Ford cousins, but with an even more exclusive status. At the heart of this beast was the Boss 429 V8, an engine that was purpose-built for NASCAR dominance. Ford developed this power plant as a homologation special, needing to produce at least 500 units to qualify it for racing. And while most people associate it with the Mustang, a few found their way into Mercury's Cyclone spoiler. The Boss 429 was unlike any other big block of its era, featuring massive aluminum heads with crescent-shaped combustion chambers, a forged steel crankshaft, and a specially designed high-flow intake. It was designed to breathe at higher amps, making it a true racing engine disguised as a street motor. Officially, Ford rated it at 375 horsepower, but anyone who's ever driven one knows that figure was laughably underrated. Real output was closer to 500 horsepower when properly tuned, making the Cyclone Spoiler Boss 429 one of the most powerful muscle cars of 1970. The Cyclone spoiler wasn't just about raw power, it was also built for high-speed stability, a crucial factor in NASCAR homologation specials. The car's long, aerodynamic body featured a distinctive, fastback roofline, a unique front-end design with an aggressive slotted grille, and a functional front chin spoiler that helped reduce lift at high speeds. Mercury gave it a set of bold racing stripes, a hood scoop that looked like it meant business, and a spoiler-specific rear wing to aid in high-speed stability. The car was designed to go fast, both on the track and the street, and unlike the more famous Mustang, it had a longer wheelbase, making it more stable at top speed. However, the Cyclone spoiler's biggest challenge was its obscurity. While the Mustang Boss 429 was heavily promoted as a rare high-performance machine, the Cyclone spoiler was a Mercury, and Mercury simply didn't have the same muscle car reputation as its Ford counterpart. The Cyclone line was known more for being a stylish alternative to the Fairlane and Torino, rather than a hardcore performance machine. And because of this, the Boss 429 version never got the attention it truly deserved. Production numbers were extremely low, exact figures remain debated, but it's believed that only a handful of true Boss 429 powered Cyclone spoilers were ever built, making it one of the rarest muscle cars of the era. Another reason for the car's rarity was that the Boss 429 engine was notoriously difficult to fit into anything other than the Mustang. The massive Hemi-headed V8 required extensive modifications to the engine bay, leading to costly and time-consuming assembly. The Mustang itself had to be sent to Car Craft for custom modifications just to accommodate the motor, and the Cyclone spoiler faced similar challenges. This meant that only a select few ever rolled out of Mercury dealerships, and even then they were overshadowed by Ford's own NASCAR homologation specials, such as the Torino Talladega and the Charger Daytona. The driving experience of the Cyclone Spoiler Boss 429 was nothing short of exhilarating. It was a true brute force muscle car with a heavy clutch, a 4-speed manual transmission, and a chassis that demanded respect. The Boss 429 engine was happiest at high RPMs, delivering a rush of power in the upper rev range that few other big blocks could match. It wasn't a car for casual cruising. It was a race-bred machine meant to be driven hard, a car that could devour highways and leave lesser muscle cars in its wake. Unfortunately, the Cyclone spoiler Boss 429 came at a time when muscle cars were already reaching their peak, and the era of high-compression, race-ready V8s was about to end. By 1971, insurance rates, emissions regulations, and changing market demands were beginning to choke out the golden age of American performance, and the Cyclone nameplate was on borrowed time. The Boss 429 engine itself was phased out, and the Mercury Cyclone disappeared after 1971, leaving behind a legacy that few remembered. Today, the 1970 Mercury Cyclone spoiler Boss 429 is one of the ultimate forgotten muscle cars. It was a true NASCAR-bred machine, an ultra-rare beast that never got the credit it deserved simply because it wore a Mercury badge instead of a Ford one. But for those who know, it represents one of the most fascinating what-ifs of the muscle car era. What if Mercury had been given the same attention and marketing push as the Mustang? What if more people had realized that the Boss 429 wasn't just for Ford's pony car? The 1994 Toyota Celica GT4 ST205 was the ultimate version of Toyota's rally-bred Celica, a car that had all the ingredients of a true performance legend but never quite gained the cult following of its rivals. With a turbocharged engine, all-wheel drive, and direct lineage to Toyota's World Rally Championship, WRC efforts, it was a machine built to dominate both the dirt and the pavement. Yet, despite its impressive engineering and motorsport pedigree, the Celica GT4 remains an underappreciated gem in the world of 1990s Japanese performance cars. Toyota had been developing the GT4 nameplate since the late 1980s, refining it through the ST65 and ST185 generations before arriving at the ST205 in 1994. This was the most powerful and advanced GT4 ever built, featuring a 2.0-liter 3S GTE turbocharged inline-4, producing 252 horsepower in Japanese spec models and slightly detuned for export markets. The engine was paired with Toyota's sophisticated all-wheel drive system, which included a viscous center differential and a Torsen rear limited slip differential to provide exceptional traction on any surface. This made the Celica GT4 a true rally car for the road, capable of handling rough terrain as well as it could carve through winding mountain roads. What made the ST205 truly special, however, was its connection to Toyota's WRC program. Unlike many homologation specials that made only minor adjustments to meet racing regulations, the Celica GT4 was built from the ground up to be competitive. The street version borrowed heavily from its rally counterpart, featuring a lightweight aluminum hood with a massive air intake, wide-body fender flares, and one of the most aggressive rear wings of its era. Toyota engineers also implemented a water-to-air intercooler instead of the more common air-to-air setup, a trick learned from rally racing to improve efficiency and reduce heat soak. In competition, the ST205 was a force to be reckoned with. It competed in the Group A era of the WRC, where it was driven by legendary racers like Juha Kankkunen and Didier Auriol. The car had the potential to challenge the best from Subaru and Mitsubishi, but controversy struck in 1995 when Toyota was caught using an illegal turbo restrictor modification, resulting in a one-year ban from the WRC. While this scandal tainted the car's legacy in motorsports, it also proved just how much potential the GT4 had. Toyota's engineers had found a way to push the limits beyond what was expected, even if it meant bending the rules. On the street, the Celica GT4 was often overlooked in favor of its more famous competitors, the Subaru Impreza WRX STI and the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution. While the WRX and Evo became rally legends with massive enthusiast followings, the Celica GT4 never quite reached the same level of recognition. Part of this was due to Toyota's shift in focus away from high-performance rally machines in the late 1990s, as the company began emphasizing reliability and mainstream appeal over motorsport success. Another reason was that the Celica name had long been associated with front-wheel drive sports coupes, making it harder for enthusiasts to see it in the same light as dedicated rally icons like the Lancer and WRX. The driving experience of the ST205 was a unique mix of refined engineering and raw performance. It had the planted stability of an all-wheel drive system, yet it was lighter and more agile than some of its AWD rivals. The 3S GTE engine was a powerhouse, delivering strong mid-range torque and a thrilling turbo kick once the boost built up. Paired with a 5-speed manual transmission, the Celica GT4 had the responsiveness and capability to attack corners with confidence, making it an exceptional driver's car for those who appreciated precision over brute force. Today, the 1994 Toyota Celica GT4 ST205 is a rare and underrated classic, with values steadily rising as enthusiasts begin to recognize its significance. Its rally heritage, turbocharged power, and all-wheel drive grip make it a true performance car of the 1990s, even if it never achieved the mainstream fame of the WRX and Evo. For those who know, the GT4 remains one of the greatest forgotten rally cars of all time, a machine that could have been a legend if only more people had paid attention. The 1984 Dodge Daytona Turbo Z was Chrysler's bold attempt to inject excitement into the affordable sports car market, a futuristic, wedge-shaped coupe that promised turbocharged performance at a budget-friendly price. At a time when the American muscle car scene was struggling to regain its footing after the fuel crises and emissions regulations of the 1970s, Dodge turned to forced induction and aerodynamic styling to create a car that felt straight out of a sci-fi movie. The result was a turbocharged front-wheel drive coupe that delivered respectable performance for its era, even if it never quite achieved the legendary status of its rear-wheel drive muscle car predecessors. By the early 1980s, Chrysler was in the midst of a major transformation under the leadership of Lee Iacocca. The company had just launched the wildly successful K-Car platform, which had saved the brand from financial collapse. But there was still a need for something exciting, something that could compete with the likes of the Chevrolet Camaro, Ford Mustang, and even import sports coupes from Japan. Enter the Dodge Daytona, which debuted in 1984 as a sleek, front-wheel drive coupe based on the Chrysler G platform, itself a modified version of the K-Car architecture. The Daytona Turbo Z was the performance flagship of the lineup, featuring a 2.2-liter turbocharged inline-4 that produced 142 horsepower and 160 lb-ft of torque. Impressive numbers for a compact, lightweight coupe in the mid-1980s. Mated to either a 5-speed manual or a 3-speed automatic, the turbocharged engine gave the Daytona surprising straight-line speed, with 0-60 mph times in the low 8-second range. While that may not seem fast by today's standards, in an era when many American performance cars were still struggling to break the 200 horsepower mark, the Turbo Z felt like a breath of fresh air. Visually, the Daytona Turbo Z looked like something out of a cyberpunk future. With its sharp, wedge-shaped design, pop-up headlights, integrated rear spoiler, and side-ground effects, it had the aggressive styling that made it instantly recognizable. The aerodynamic design wasn't just for looks. Dodge engineers spent considerable time refining the car's shape for better fuel efficiency and stability at high speeds. The Turbo Z trim level added special badging, unique wheels, and a more aggressive suspension setup to enhance handling. Inside, the Daytona embraced the digital revolution of the 1980s with available high-tech features such as a digital instrument cluster, an optional talking car voice module, similar to what was found in the Chrysler New Yorker, and sports bucket seats that gave the interior a cockpit-like feel. The combination of futuristic styling, turbocharged power, and affordability made the Daytona Turbo Z an attractive option for young buyers looking for something fun and modern. However, despite its turbocharged performance, the Daytona Turbo Z had one major drawback: its front-wheel drive layout. While front-wheel drive was becoming increasingly common for economy cars, traditional muscle car enthusiasts were skeptical of its use in a performance coupe. Unlike the rear-wheel drive Camaros and Mustangs of the time, which offered tail-happy handling and big V8 power, the Daytona Turbo Z was designed more for stability and efficiency. It handled well for what it was, but torque steer under hard acceleration and a lack of true rear drive dynamics kept it from being a serious contender in the muscle car world. That being said, the Daytona Turbo Z did have its fans. In the right hands, it was a capable performer, and with a few aftermarket modifications, the turbocharged 2.2-liter engine could be pushed well beyond its factory output. In later years, Dodge continued to improve the Daytona lineup, eventually introducing the even more powerful Turbo 2 and Turbo 3 models, as well as the legendary Shelby Z and IROC RT versions, which helped the Daytona gain some respect as a legitimate performance car. Today, the 1984 Dodge Daytona Turbo Z is a fascinating piece of 1980s automotive history. It represents a time when Chrysler was experimenting with turbocharging and trying to redefine American performance in a world that was moving away from traditional V8 muscle cars. While it may not have reached the legendary status of its Mustang and Camaro rivals, the Daytona Turbo Z remains a unique and underrated sports coupe, a car that looked like the future and brought turbocharged fun to the masses at a time when American performance desperately needed a spark. The 2004-2006 Pontiac GTO was one of the most controversial yet underrated modern muscle cars ever produced. It carried one of the most legendary names in American automotive history. But instead of being an all-new design built in Detroit, it was essentially a rebadged Australian Holden Monaro. While purists scoffed at its origins and uninspiring styling, those who actually drove one quickly realized that the new GTO was an absolute powerhouse, hiding a Corvette-sourced LS V8 under its plain-looking sheet metal. It was fast, refined, and capable, but its subdued design and lack of aggressive marketing kept it from achieving the legendary status of its 1960s predecessors. By the early 2000s, Pontiac was in dire need of a real muscle car. The Firebird had been discontinued in 2002, and while the brand had a few sporty models, nothing truly captured the raw excitement of classic Pontiacs like the GTO, Trans Am, or Judge. Enter Bob Lutz, the GM executive who saw an opportunity to bring the Australian Holden Monaro to the US market as the new GTO. The Monaro, built by GM's Australian division, was a rear-wheel drive coupe with serious performance potential, and with some minor modifications, it was transformed into a Pontiac. The first version of the reborn GTO arrived in 2004, powered by the 5.7-liter LS1 V8 from the C5 Corvette, producing 350 horsepower. It was already a serious performer, but it wasn't until 2005 that the GTO truly came alive. GM replaced the LS1 with the larger, more powerful 6.0-liter LS2 V8, pushing output to 400 horsepower and 400 lb-ft of torque, numbers that put it right in the middle of the muscle car wars alongside the Mustang GT and Dodge Charger SRT8. With a 6-speed manual transmission, the GTO could hit 60 mph in just over 4.5 seconds, making it one of the quickest muscle cars of its time. Where the 2006 GTO really stood out was its driving experience. Unlike older muscle cars, which often felt raw and unrefined, the Monaro-based GTO had a level of sophistication rarely seen in American performance coupes. The interior was far better than what GM typically offered at the time, with comfortable leather seats, a well-designed dashboard, and a surprisingly quiet cabin. The independent rear suspension made it handle better than traditional live-axle muscle cars, and while it had a bit of body roll due to its heavier chassis, the ride quality was excellent for a performance car. However, despite its impressive power and refinement, the 2006 GTO struggled to win over traditional muscle car fans. The biggest complaint was its styling, or lack thereof. Unlike the original GTOs, which had aggressive hood scoops, bold lines, and muscular stances, the new GTO was a simple, rounded coupe that looked more like a slightly larger Pontiac Grand Prix than a legendary muscle car. Even with the twin hood scoops added in 2005, it didn't scream performance the way people expected a GTO to. Another issue was its price. The 2006 GTO started at around $33,000, which was significantly more expensive than the Mustang GT, its closest competitor. While the GTO had more power and a better interior, many buyers couldn't justify the extra cost, especially when the styling didn't match the performance. Production of the new GTO ended after the 2006 model year. largely due to slow sales and the upcoming changes to GM's lineup. A total of 40,808 units were sold over 3 years, making it a relatively rare car compared to the Mustang and Charger. However, in the years since, the 2006 GTO has gained a cult following among enthusiasts who appreciate its combination of raw LS power, comfortable ride quality, and sleeper looks. Today, the 2006 Pontiac GTO is considered one of the best modern muscle cars that never got the respect it deserved. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't overhyped, and it didn't try to be something it wasn't. Instead, it was a brutally fast, well-built coupe that delivered serious performance without drawing too much attention. While it may not have had the retro appeal of the later Dodge Challenger or 5th Gen Camaro, the GTO remains a hidden gem for those who value muscle car power without the theatrics. It may not have looked the part, but once you put your foot down, there was no mistaking that this was a true GTO in spirit. The 1963 Studebaker Avanti R2 was one of the most radical American cars ever built. A futuristic coupe with a factory supercharged V8, advanced aerodynamics, and a performance pedigree that could embarrass Corvettes of the era. It was a car that should have changed Studebaker's fate, a machine decades ahead of its time, but instead it became a symbol of what could have been. Despite its innovation and record-breaking speed, the Avanti was ultimately doomed, not because it wasn't good enough, but because Studebaker was already on the brink of collapse when it hit the market. Designed by the legendary Raymond Loewy, the Avanti didn't look like anything else on the road in the early 60s. While other American cars were drowning in chrome and massive fins, the Avanti was sleek, low-slung, and aerodynamic. Its fiberglass body eliminated the need for a traditional grille, giving it a smooth, almost aircraft-like front end that was unlike anything else at the time. The design was bold, even polarizing, but it gave the Avanti an unmistakable presence that still turns heads today. Under the hood, the Avanti R2 packs serious performance. At a time when most American cars were focused on straight-line speed rather than handling, Studebaker went a different route. The R2 version featured a 289 cubic inch V8, but what made it special was the addition of a Paxton supercharger, boosting output to a factory-rated 289 horsepower. That number might not seem impressive by today's standards, but back in 1963, it put the Avanti in direct competition with the hottest Corvettes of the time. In fact, an Avanti R2 set a record at the Bonneville Salt Flats, hitting 150 mph, making it one of the fastest American production cars of its era. Performance wasn't just limited to top speed. The Avanti had front disc brakes, something unheard of in most American cars at the time, giving it stopping power far superior to many of its competitors. The interior was also ahead of its time, featuring aircraft-style toggle switches and a cockpit-like layout that made the driver feel like they were piloting something special. Unfortunately, no matter how good the Avanti was, it was never going to save Studebaker. By the early 1960s, Studebaker was struggling to stay afloat, and production delays, quality control issues, and financial troubles meant that the Avanti never had a real chance. Studebaker planned to build 20,000 units in its first year, but production issues limited output to just over 4,600. And by 1964, Studebaker was shutting down its South Bend, Indiana factory, effectively ending the Avanti's run under the Studebaker name. The Avanti name didn't die with Studebaker, though. After the company ceased production, former Studebaker dealers acquired the rights to the Avanti and continued building versions of it under the Avanti Motor Corporation. These later models carried on the car's legacy, but they were never quite the same as the original R2. Today, the 1963 Studebaker Avanti R2 is a fascinating piece of automotive history. It was one of the fastest, most advanced American cars of its time, yet it never got the recognition it deserved because it was attached to a dying brand. It's a car that represented both the brilliance and the tragedy of Studebaker, a company that had the vision to create something truly groundbreaking, but not the resources to make it a lasting success. While it never achieved the mainstream fame of the Corvette or Mustang, those who know the Avanti understand that it was one of the greatest American performance cars of the early 60s, a machine that proved Studebaker had the engineering talent to compete with the best. If only it had a little more time. The 2010 Saab 95 Aero XWD was the final act of a company that had long been known for its quirky, yet innovative cars, a bold attempt to reclaim relevance in the luxury sedan market before Saab's eventual collapse. At a time when the brand was in turmoil and its future was uncertain, the 95 Aero XWD arrived as a beacon of what could have been. It was sleek, powerful, and offered a unique alternative to the established German and Japanese luxury sedans. Yet, despite all its attributes, it didn't get the recognition it deserved. Saab had always been a brand defined by its unconventional approach to engineering and design. The 95 Aero XWD was no exception. It featured an all-wheel drive system, XWD, that was rare in the segment, particularly for a Saab. The system wasn't just a gimmick, it was designed for performance, ensuring that the 95 Aero was agile and responsive, able to provide a true driving experience, even in challenging conditions. This AWD system was coupled with a 2.8L turbocharged V6, which churned out 300 horsepower, giving the 95 Aero impressive acceleration and a respectable 0-60 mph time of just over 6 seconds. For a luxury sedan, that was no small feat, and it stood out among competitors in terms of both performance and handling. But while the car had the makings of a true competitor in the luxury segment, Saab's financial troubles overshadowed it. The 95 Aero XWD came at a time when Saab was on the brink of collapse. The Swedish automaker had already been sold to General Motors in the 1980s, and despite efforts to turn things around, they were consistently struggling in the marketplace. The 95 Aero, launched as the brand's flagship model, represented Saab's last real attempt to make a significant impact in the premium car world. However, with the uncertainty of the company's future hanging over it, many potential buyers were hesitant to invest in a brand that might not survive the next few years. Despite its low production numbers, the 95 Aero XWD was a standout in terms of design. The exterior retained Saab's distinct look, subtle yet sporty, with an emphasis on aerodynamics and a modern, clean profile. The interior, like all Saabs, was driver-focused but also offered the luxury and technology expected in this segment. The cabin featured high-quality materials, a sophisticated infotainment system, and of course the signature Saab touch, unique design details that set it apart from the cookie-cutter interiors of other sedans in its class. One of the most unique aspects of the 95 Aero was its turbocharged V6 engine. Saab had always been known for its turbocharged power plants, and the 2.8L turbo V6 in the 95 Aero represented the pinnacle of this legacy. It offered a balance of power and smoothness that many drivers found to be exhilarating, yet refined, perfect for long drives or spirited weekend road trips. The all-wheel drive system also made the car more versatile, handling well in rain or snow, which was a major selling point in markets like Sweden or Northern Europe. Unfortunately, the world didn't seem ready to give Saab the chance it needed. The car market was already dominated by the likes of Audi, Mercedes-Benz, and Lexus. And even though the 95 Aero was a worthy competitor, Saab was struggling with its image and financial stability. The brand had already been in decline for years, and most buyers were not willing to gamble on a company that had gone through so many ownership changes and had uncertain future prospects. In the end, Saab went bankrupt in 2011, just a year after the 95 Aero's release. The 95 itself was discontinued, and with it, Saab's ambitious attempt to re-enter the luxury market was cut short. The 95 Aero XWD, much like the brand itself, became a forgotten icon. A car that could have thrived had circumstances been different. Today, the 95 Aero XWD remains an underappreciated gem in the automotive world. It was a car that had the potential to carve out a niche in the luxury sedan market, but it came too late, with too little fanfare, from a company on the verge of disappearing. As a result, it remains a rare sight on the road and a reminder of Saab's last stand in the world of premium automobiles. For those who do own one, the 95 Aero XWD is a reminder of what could have been, stylish, powerful, and unique in every way. The 1989 Ford Thunderbird Super Coupe was a car that stood out in the midst of a crowded market of performance vehicles in the late 80s, yet somehow remains one of the most underappreciated American performance cars of its time. As a high-tech, luxury-oriented grand tourer, the Thunderbird Super Coupe offered a unique combination of refinement, performance, and sophistication, qualities that were sometimes overshadowed by the muscle car fanfare surrounding the Mustang and Camaro. Ford's Thunderbird had always been positioned as a personal luxury car, often offering a blend of comfort and style over outright performance. But in the late 80s, Ford decided to elevate the Thunderbird into a more serious, performance-oriented vehicle. Enter the Super Coupe. With a turbocharged and intercooled supercharged V6 engine, the Thunderbird Super Coupe was anything but ordinary. The 3.8L V6 produced 210 horsepower and 3 15 lb of torque, a solid number at the time, particularly for a car that wasn't solely focused on raw power. The supercharged V6 engine was paired with a smooth shifting 5-speed manual or an automatic transmission, offering a solid performance experience for both the driving enthusiast and those seeking a more relaxed ride. The Thunderbird Super Coupe's performance was far from just engine power. The addition of independent rear suspension, IRS, was another highlight, which made the car's handling significantly more refined and composed compared to its contemporaries, many of which still use solid rear axles. This setup gave the Super Coupe a smooth, confident ride even at higher speeds, making it one of the most well-handling American cars of the time. The ride was sporty, but not harsh, and it balanced comfort and performance in a way that few cars in the segment could match. In terms of design, the Thunderbird Super Coupe was classic late 80s Ford, sleek, aerodynamic, and a little futuristic for its time. The car had a distinct fastback roofline and integrated spoiler, adding to its aggressive yet refined appearance. The Super Coupe was more mature than a Mustang GT or Camaro Z28, and its slightly more reserved design gave it a sophisticated air, making it an ideal choice for someone who wanted performance without being too flashy. The interior of the Thunderbird Super Coupe matched its refined exterior. It came equipped with a full array of luxury features, including leather upholstery, power-adjustable seats, a premium sound system, and automatic climate control. It was a car that didn't just excel in performance, but also offered a high level of comfort and convenience, making it an excellent long-distance cruiser. However, despite all its technological advancements and impressive specs, the Thunderbird Super Coupe never seemed to garner the respect it deserved. The Mustang, Camaro, and Firebird were firmly entrenched in the American performance car scene, and the Super Coupe, despite its performance chops, never truly managed to break through that barrier. It didn't help that the Super Coupe's image was somewhat bogged down by its association with the Thunderbird name, a model that had always been more focused on luxury than on all-out performance. To many, it simply wasn't a Mustang, and therefore it never received the level of attention or reverence that its performance and capabilities warranted. Additionally, the Super Coupe faced stiff competition in the form of the Chevrolet Camaro IROC-Z, the Pontiac Firebird Trans Am, and the ever-popular Mustang GT. These cars were entrenched in the American muscle car culture, and as a result, the Super Coupe often got lost in the mix. While the Thunderbird Super Coupe was a luxury performance car that offered both comfort and thrilling driving dynamics, it didn't fit into the traditional mold of what muscle car enthusiasts were looking for, and that limited its appeal. Despite its underrated status, the Thunderbird Super Coupe was a solid car that offered a blend of refinement, luxury, and performance rarely seen in an American car of its era. It was a high-tech grand tourer that offered a supercharged V6, IRS, and a level of sophistication that was ahead of its time, yet it never received the recognition it deserved, often overshadowed by more iconic nameplates. Today, the Thunderbird Super Coupe remains a bit of a forgotten gem. Those who are fortunate enough to own one know just how special it is, but to the general public, it remains largely overlooked. It's a car that, had it been marketed differently or had more widespread recognition, could have been one of the most respected American performance vehicles of its era. The 1971 Chevrolet Vega Cosworth was a car that should have been a game-changer for American performance, but due to a combination of unfortunate circumstances, it faded into obscurity. At its core, the Vega Cosworth was an ambitious attempt by Chevrolet to break out of the traditional American muscle car mold and enter the world of sophisticated European-style performance. It was an effort that brought together the best of both worlds: Chevrolet's styling and engineering expertise paired with Cosworth's race-bred technology. The Vega itself was Chevrolet's answer to the compact car market, a small, affordable vehicle aimed at competing with imports like the Volkswagen Beetle and the Japanese offerings from Toyota and Datsun. However, while the regular Vega had its share of mechanical issues and a somewhat tarnished reputation for poor build quality, the Cosworth Vega was a radically different animal. Chevrolet turned to Cosworth, a respected British engineering firm known for building high-performance engines, to develop a twin-cam 2.0L four-cylinder engine for the Vega. This was a significant step forward for American cars at the time. The Cosworth engine was technologically advanced, with dual overhead camshafts, a high compression ratio, and fuel injection, features that made it one of the most sophisticated power plants ever to come from an American automaker. In fact, the Cosworth Vega's engine was similar in design to those found in racing cars, and it was capable of producing 110 horsepower, an impressive number for a small car in the early 70s. The engine was paired with a 4-speed manual transmission, giving the Vega Cosworth a sprightly and responsive driving experience that was a stark contrast to the usual American fare of the time. The car was capable of 0 to 65 mph times in the 8-second range, which, for the early 1970s, was a respectable performance figure. In terms of handling, the Cosworth Vega was no slouch either, thanks to a suspension setup that was far more advanced than the typical compact car. It had front and rear stabilizer bars, independent rear suspension, and disc brakes all around, ensuring that it handled better than many of its contemporaries. It was a car designed to be fun to drive, offering both spirited performance and a degree of sophistication not typically seen in American cars. However, despite its impressive engineering, the Vega Cosworth faced several obstacles that ultimately doomed it to obscurity. One of the biggest factors was its price. The Vega Cosworth was priced at around $4,000, significantly more than the standard Vega, and more than many competing compact cars from other manufacturers. At the time, consumers simply weren't willing to pay a premium for a small American car, especially when the Vega had a reputation for being unreliable and poorly built. The general public, already skeptical of the Vega due to its reputation for rust issues and engine problems, wasn't willing to take a chance on the Cosworth version. In addition to the price and the Vega's reputation, another key factor in the car's failure to catch on was its relatively low production numbers. Chevrolet only produced around 2,000 units of the Cosworth Vega during its brief production run from 1971 to 1973, making it an extremely rare car even at the time. With so few units on the road, the car never gained the kind of cultural traction it might have needed to become an iconic vehicle. Furthermore, while the car's advanced engineering made it stand out, it wasn't enough to overcome the challenges of the American car market in the 1970s, especially as fuel prices were rising and consumers began to move away from performance-oriented compact cars in favor of more fuel-efficient options. By the time the Vega Cosworth was discontinued, Chevrolet's attention had shifted to other models, and the Cosworth Vega had faded into the background. Today, it remains one of the great what-ifs of American automotive history. Had it been produced in greater numbers, or had the Vega's reputation been better, the Cosworth Vega could have been the car that finally gave Chevrolet the performance reputation it sought for its small cars. Instead, it became a forgotten legend, a niche offering that was far ahead of its time but never quite reached its potential. The Vega Cosworth is now a highly collectible car among enthusiasts who recognize its unique place in automotive history. It represents a rare moment when an American automaker took a risk and tried to build something special, only to see that vision falter due to circumstances beyond its control. It's a car that remains one of the most intriguing examples of what could have been. A performance car that could have changed perceptions of American cars if only the market had been ready for it. The 1991 Alfa Romeo SZ S30, known for its outlandish styling and incredible performance, is one of those rare gems that has left car enthusiasts scratching their heads in wonder. Designed by the legendary Italian design firm Zagato, the SZ was part of a brief, fascinating chapter in Alfa Romeo's history. This high-performance Grand Tourer was born from the desire to create a car that combined the engineering prowess of Alfa Romeo with the cutting-edge design of Zagato. But while it looked like something from another planet, it was a car built for driving enthusiasts who appreciated both performance and Italian flair. At the heart of the SZ was a 3.0L V6 engine, producing 210 horsepower. For its time, that was a respectable figure, allowing the car to accelerate with the grace and speed expected of an Alfa Romeo. It wasn't just about straight-line performance, though. The SZ's true strength lay in its handling. Built with a lightweight design and a low center of gravity, the car offered razor-sharp handling that made it a joy to throw around tight corners and winding roads. It was a machine made for enthusiasts who understood the thrill of precision driving, where the focus wasn't just on speed, but on the connection between driver and car. However, the SZ wasn't just about numbers and handling. The car's design was undeniably striking, and that's an understatement. The body, with its aggressive lines and sharp angles, was polarizing to say the least. It looked like something from a futuristic sci-fi movie, a design that was so unconventional that many people couldn't quite decide if they loved it or hated it. The front end was dominated by a blunt, angular nose, while the rear sported a sharp, squared-off tail. Its wide stance and muscular proportions were certainly attention-grabbing, but they also made it stand out from everything else on the road, which was the point. Alfa Romeo and Zagato wanted to create a car that was visually unique, and they succeeded in spades. But despite its incredible performance and eye-catching design, the SZ was never officially sold in the US, which sealed its fate as a rarity on American roads. Alfa Romeo had a history of withdrawing from the US market, and by the time the SZ was launched, they were no longer officially selling cars in America. As a result, the car remained largely unknown to many in the States, even though it had all the makings of a legendary sports car. Its low production numbers, only 1,036 units were ever built, further cemented its status as a rare collector's item, especially among those lucky enough to have driven one. The car's rarity, paired with its eccentric design, made it a misunderstood vehicle in its time. While its mechanical capabilities were top tier, its design made it a bit of a conversation starter. Some people couldn't get past its futuristic, almost alien looks, which made it a tough sell to a broader audience. It wasn't a car that was designed to blend in or cater to mainstream tastes, but rather it was a machine made for those who saw the world differently and appreciated something out of the ordinary. In the years since its production, the SZ has developed a cult following. It's a car for the connoisseurs who recognize its unique place in automotive history. While the general public might overlook it as an oddity, enthusiasts appreciate it as an example of Alfa Romeo's boldness in pushing boundaries. It wasn't about mass appeal, but about creating something that was pure in its intent, high performance, and striking individuality wrapped in an unmistakably bold design. Despite its rarity and relative obscurity, the Alfa Romeo SZ remains an iconic model for those who know its worth. It may have been overshadowed by more popular supercars of the era, but for those in the know, it's a hidden gem, a car that combined raw Italian performance with one of the most outlandish designs ever seen on the road. It's the kind of car that car enthusiasts dream about finding, hidden away in some obscure corner of the world, waiting to be rediscovered by the next generation of drivers who can appreciate its unique combination of performance and design. The 1991 Alfa Romeo SZ ES30 will never be a mainstream icon, but for the few who are lucky enough to have driven or owned one, it represents a perfect balance of performance, rarity, and avant-garde styling. It's a testament to Alfa Romeo's commitment to building cars that defy convention, even when the rest of the world doesn't quite understand.